The British countryside is rich in its folklore and ghost stories. Thousands of years of human history have left us with a tapestry of experiences of those before us. Nowhere is this as true than in the Peak District National Park in the heart of England. You'll be hard pressed to find anywhere with such an abundance of chilling tales tied to the land. But these aren't just fables to keep children in after dark. These ghost stories are the legacy of tragedy. When imagining the winding roads of the peaks, the iconography of Winnats Pass will likely spring to mind. Formed over millennia, melting glacial ice penetrated the limestone rock, creating a vast underground cave network that eventually succumbed to erosion and collapsed into the valley we see today.
If you take a look, you can see the walls of the gorge lined with caves and fissures, perhaps offering the perfect opportunity to ambush unsuspecting travellers.
This would ultimately spell the end for the star-crossed lovers, Alan and Clara, who would have their dreams of a life together cruelly extinguished, instead fated to haunt the treacherous Winnats Pass. There are variations on the story, but the most commonly told account from surviving information is as follows. The young couple were destined to marry, though Clara's father disapproved of Alan's financial standing and forbade the union. Left with no choice, the couple left Scotland on horseback to start their new life, to be married in the Peak Forest Chapel, where parental approval wasn't a concern. As darkness fell, the couple reached the gate of Winnats Pass and began on the treacherous road. Without warning, their horse reared in distress, and before they knew what was happening, they were dragged to a nearby barn by 5 miners. The men proceeded to rob the couple of their finery and savings, before covering the evidence of their crime. Clara was killed instantly by a pickaxe to the head, silencing her screams. Alan had his throat slit ear to ear and was left to bleed out. With the murderer's local knowledge of the land, the couple's bodies were hidden in a nearby unused mine shaft. They'd remain here for 10 years, until they were finally uncovered and laid to rest in the nearby St Edmund's Church in Castleton. And though the miners escaped the law, justice would ultimately catch up to them. One by one dealt an untimely fate, as they themselves had so callously done to Clara and Alan. Nicholas Cock fell from the heights of nearby Mamtor. John Bradshaw, struck by a falling rock while traversing the pass. And a further 2, Thomas Hall and Francis Butler, were driven to suicide, haunted by their actions that night. Leaving the final perpetrator, James Ashton, to live a life of shame and guilt, on his deathbed confessing to the murders and incriminating all 5 involved, giving a semblance of closure to this harrowing story.
It's said that if you listen closely, you can still hear the anguished cries of the couple, resonating through the valley on the winds.
Magpie Mine stands as a hint to a once thriving industry, woven into the very fabric of the landscape and way of life here for generations. Lead mining in the peaks can be traced back possibly as far as Roman times, and grew to become the main source of lead in Europe. For centuries it served as a staple of British industry. Closing for the final time in 1954, the remnants of Magpie lead mine are approaching 300 years old, and is one of the best preserved 19th century lead mines in the UK.
As you can see, it looks as though the workers downed their tools where they stood. It's amazing how much is still here. And though the dangers of the mining industry are well understood, it's instead the wrath of man to which we can attribute the hauntings here.
With several mines working the same lead vein, conflict is inevitable. Tensions between Magpie and the neighbouring Magpie Mine came to a head when Magpie workers ignited fires that tragically resulted in the deaths of 3 Magpie miners from smoke inhalation. Though during the trial that followed, it was nearly impossible to identify on which of the workers' responsibility should lie, and as a result, all 24 were acquitted of the heinous act. If local folklore is to be believed, in their grief, the wives of the 3 deceased miners placed a curse on the mine, colloquially known as the Widow's Curse. The mine would reopen in 1839, and this is notably when reports of peculiar phenomena first started. Miners would note the smell of smoke within the tunnels, fleeing to the surface with the memory of the disaster still in the forefront of their minds, only to find it dissipate as quickly as it began. Numerous workers, as well as visitors to the site, even to this day, report witnessing a lone miner making their way towards the main shaft before disappearing before their eyes. All these centuries later, Magpie Mine stands as a proud relic of Derbyshire's iconic but tumultuous industrial folklore.
There are hundreds of documented air crash sites across the Peak District National Park, most of which military and the result of poor visibility and navigational difficulties. Here at Bleaklow, the wreckage of this US B29 superfortress, though only vaguely distinguishable, is some of the best preserved, probably because it's so hard to find.
Though beyond the physical scars of the landscape, the spectre of disaster still haunts these moors. The overexposed, a large 4-engine B29A superfortress belonging to the 16th Photographic Reconnaissance Squadron, set out on a routine training exercise from RAF Scampton near Lincoln. Clearing the southern Pennines meant ascending into the dense cloud cover, and with visual navigation impossible, the crew timed their flight over the peaks to descend out of the clouds into clear air to the west. As they began their approach into Burtonwood Air Base, the crew believed they were clear of the hills. A fatal mistake as the plane struck the summit of higher shelf stones of Bleaklow, the last high peak. Tragically, all 13 American airmen aboard were killed. Just one example of the lives claimed here. With the high number of aviation fatalities here in the early to mid-20th century, an intriguing pattern of paranormal phenomena has emerged.
Particularly here, but across much of the Peak District, there have been countless reports of phantom planes, stricken aircraft flying low overhead with an ominous silence, only to plunge from the darkened skies into the moors. The occurrence here has become so synonymous with the land that even some of the most practical, seasoned farmers might tell you of their encounters with the ghost planes.
In 1995, one such skeptic, retired local Tony Ingle, came forward with one of the most detailed witness accounts to date. While out walking his dog Ben, Tony described seeing a wartime aircraft he believed to be a Dakota pass silently 50 feet or so overhead. In his own words, "I could see it was banking as if it was trying to turn, and it seemed to go down just over the hedge. I ran up the lane to see if I could see anything. I expected the plane to be there in the field, but there was nothing." Tony added that his dog Ben refused to enter the field as if deathly afraid of something, and the whole experience left him questioning his beliefs in the search for a logical explanation. If you enjoyed these tales, you may like my previous video looking at more of the most haunted places in the Peak District. We've only just scratched the surface of the ghostly folklore in these parts, and I'm sure I'll return in the near future. Until next time.